Here to talk about pets, pet nutrition, and wellness, anything that can help our fur children live a longer, vibrant, and happier lives.
All right.
Yeah. Welcome to Vital Pet
Vital
Life
Pet Life.
Podcast. Hey everyone, this is Donnie, your chief treat lady.
And this is Dr. Amber, your official veterinarian at Vital Pet Life.
So last time we had Jasmine, a possum fur mom of 8 dogs and 5 cats. We were able to unveil how she was able to make those fur babies get along.
And not just that, but also how a fur parent understands the commitment and responsibilities.
Yeah, and speaking of responsibilities, let's take it a step further with our special guest who's an animal nutritionist. Let's uncover her experience in animal nutrition and the essential nutrients that animals need.
Let's all welcome Laura Metcalf. She has a master's degree in animal nutrition.
Hi, Laura.
Hi, Donnie. Hi, Dr. Amber. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to have you in the show and we're excited to talk about animal nutrition. So, Laura, is there anything like maybe like we always wanted to know how our guests like started in this path, and we want to know what made you decide to be an animal nutritionist? Like, is there something that you can share when you were a kid or inspired you to become an animal nutritionist?
But really, I would say it was an accident. Finishing high school and trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life, I was really struggling to know what that was. But if I looked at my life thus far, one thing that was a constant was that I always loved animals. So at that point in my time, or really only thinking the one career that I had to choose from that was helping animals was being a veterinarian. So I actually went to university for a degree in animal science, then planning to go to vet school after that. But midway through that undergrad degree, I learned that most vets either work in the meat industry, which is not my forte, or the vet clinic space is actually really probably more stressful than I have the emotional constitution for.
I agree.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. So I needed a backup plan at that stage, and I explored things like genetic engineering or zoology, and then I realized I was gravitating a lot towards animal nutrition courses. So within my animal science degree, you have to take a bunch of electives, beyond just the standard biology, chemistry, that sort of thing. And looking back, I had already taken all sorts of production animal nutrition. So that would be your beef, your dairy, swine. And then I started taking wildlife nutrition. I did companion animal nutrition, which is, your pets. And
Mhm.
I fell in love with nutrition. Funny enough, I ended up ending my undergrad taking a few different aquaculture nutrition courses, which turned out to be my favorite. Got all the
Oh,
challenges of every other kind of nutrition, but you have to deliver that nutrition through water. So
Hmm.
that's a whole extra little challenge. So
that's
that's actually where I
cool.
ended up doing my master's degree is in aquaculture nutrition.
That's exciting. That's really interesting. Like I didn't even know that there's a thing about aquaculture nutrition.
Hmm.
So, Laura, I'm really interested in this aquaculture nutrition. So, can you explain the differences that you've seen in delivering nutrients through water versus what we typically think of just eating?
Absolutely. So across the board, animals, people, fish, we all have really similar digestive tracts.
Mhm.
Some have different components, some have fewer components, some have more. But across the board, the sort of fundamentals of nutrition carry. So for a fish, they still need protein, they still need fat. Some fish even need carbohydrates.
Really?
But
Mm.
to convey that sort of formulated feed, that feed also has to be water stable. Many
Mhm.
nutrients are water soluble. So if you were to just, sprinkle fat and protein into the water, it won't make it to the fish.
Mm.
Oh,
So fish food is a really unique challenge because it needs to be sort of encapsulated, let's say, so that all the water soluble things, which is the majority of things that your body needs, but don't leach out into the water and actually do make it into the fish their digestive tract. And then on the flip side, fish also live in the same space that their waste products are put out
Oh,
into, right?
right.
Yeah.
So especially when you're talking about aquaculture in a closed environment, not in open water, but in say like a fish tank, that you're feeding that fish, the feed needs to make it through the water in order for fish to eat it and not degrade. But then it also has to be so perfectly formulated that to minimize the waste products, then the fish puts out into the water. Because if the waste product is too much, then that fish can't live in that water anymore. So it's really interesting the challenges in aquaculture.
Wow. Just one curiosity about aquaculture. Is it better to have like an aquaculture fish that's in by the ocean or inside? I mean, to me, that's how I see it, but how do you differentiate? Like, especially when most of the fish that we're eating are ocean raised, I presume, right? So what kind of nutrition are we getting for both? I mean, is there like a difference?
I would say the fish has been raised in that it's been fed a formulated feed. It's going to be really similar.
Mhm.
I can't speak for fish that have been, caught from the ocean, like wild caught. But
Mhm.
in terms of a formulated feed, it's catered very closely to the species of fish, regardless of whether that species is going to be in the ocean or in a lake or in a fish tank sort of thing. That the needs of the species is still going to be the same. And like I said about the waste products, when you're feeding a fish that's maybe out in the ocean, the waste accumulation in the water would be, you would think it would be less of an issue than if you had a fish in a tank, but
Had to be clean, you think? Like that maybe that's why like some fishery, like let's say areas in Atlantic that's really clean by Alaska. I know I bet there's also some of it are fisheries that are wild, but some of it too are farm, right? And
Mhm.
at the same time, like maybe Tasmania, it's really clean, it's really out of reach, right? And probably Norwegian salmons or Scottish salmons, right? So it needs to be clean for us to be able to. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, yeah. So not only are you worried about keeping the water clean in your fish tank, but we're also worried about keeping the water clean in our oceans and our lakes where the fish are raised. So even in those cases, the feed is very tightly formulated to exactly what the fish needs and nothing more than that.
So there's a lot of like education, I think, for us in the public to really understand how what goes into aquaculture, and it's not really a bad thing
It's
to,
true.
yeah.
It's true. The nice thing about aquaculture is that those fish are, they're fed a diet that's consistent. And it is true that you are what you eat. So if you're feeding a diet that's consistent, the fish themselves are also consistent.
Mm, that's cool. Super interesting.
Laura, let me ask you, because I think, in the public, there's a lot of information about farm raised versus ocean raised or, wild caught. And I've always kind of heard and read that farmed fish are more toxic. They have buildup of toxins in them that is then passed on to whatever eats them. So, can you discuss that a little bit and maybe dispel some misconceptions that we might have about farm raised fish?
Yeah, I can do that. I can't speak specifically to individual farms and whatnot, but I can say across the board when you're talking about animal nutrition, whether that be your dairy cow, swine, or maybe we're talking about fish species, an unhealthy animal is not a productive animal. So it is in everybody's best interest for the fish to be in a healthy environment, and that includes the cleanliness of the water, that includes the quality of the feed, all those sorts of things. So I would say I personally am happy to eat a farmed fish fillet, let's say.
Okay.
I like farm fish too. Like I love like Scottish salmon, and I assume that it's all farm. And I really like it because it's fatty and tasty. Yeah. So, Laura, now that we're discussing about fish, the vital pet, we're really proponents of pet nutrition. And I think you've seen in our products, we're pretty much we dive into the fish oil because I feel like fish oil has a lot of benefits to an animal. Is there any like essential nutrients that animals should have in their daily diet? And do you think like having a fish oil in their daily diet is good or not?
Absolutely. If you think about dog and cat food sold in the USA, all of that has to meet AFCO guidelines, and AFCO is the American Association of Feed Control Officials.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a group of professionals from the pet food industry whose job it is to kind of provide guidelines for nutrient requirements and what ingredients are safe to be used in pet food, as well as what sort of information should be shared on packaging. So all the dog and cat foods, like I said, are already formulated to meet those AFCO guidelines. So that's ensuring that they have all the nutrients already in that diet to satisfy the dog or cat's needs. But the nice thing about things like adding fish oil to your dog's diet, it's the one spot where you have to really cater your diet to your pet. So it's kind of like, dogs are not all created equally, just like people aren't all created equally.
Mm-hmm.
We all have slightly different needs in terms of, maybe somebody has really dry skin compared to somebody else has really oily skin. And
Exactly.
your supplements that you add to your pet's diet is where you can cater it to suit them best.
Right. Right. I remember we have a discussion about like essential nutrients that you think animals should have, like specifically for dogs and cats. I remember like the omega-3s. Can you like expound it or explain it to us again? I remember we had that discussion before about essentials.
Sure. Yeah. So a nutrient is considered essential when it can't be made in your body. Either it can't be made at all, or it can't be made in sufficient amounts to satisfy your needs. So omega-3 fatty acids are one of those that we can't synthesize in our bodies, neither can dogs.
Mm-hmm.
They come strictly from marine sources, so a saltwater fish oil per se.
Mm-hmm.
And so omega-3s are hugely important for a slew of things. And I would say for people, for pets across the board, it's the one supplement that I would suggest that everybody take, to be honest. A high quality omega-3 would be wonderfully helpful for a range of things, like I said, dry skin earlier.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing personally I love to take it for.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's cognitive benefits. There's digestive benefits. Um, it's across the board a great one to recommend.
So what about like animals that are allergic? I came across animals that are allergic to fish oil or had food allergy. Is there like a substitute for omega-3s? I know there's a lot of products out there that basically have omega-3s, but you can get it from plants. Like, have you heard of that? Or like Dr. Amber?
There,
Oh,
Yeah.
you're asking me?
Yeah, I mean there's some plant-based
Yeah.
vitamins or supplements that
Yeah.
can give like omega-3s, right? So
Yeah, so over the years, I had a couple of patients that just seemed to have allergies when getting fish oil. And so we switched to flaxseed oil. Has omegas. I don't think they're quite as powerful in their effects as fish oil, but that's what I would recommend. Laura, what's your experience with that?
yeah.
I gotta say, I'm really surprised that you had patients that showed reaction to a fish oil. Allergies are usually associated with proteins, not fats. So that's
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
interesting.
So there's a product that they advertise, my vet couldn't do anything about the allergies and I started giving this and everything cleared up. One of those type of ads that you hear on the radio and you see on TV. So I have a friend who tried that with her dog and she said it just made him so much worse.
Wow.
And there's a lot of ingredients in there, but it was heavy on fish oil too. So, and I know he had struggled with like they had struggled with finding a food he didn't react to, and he seemed to react more to the fish-based foods. So I mean, I can't say for sure it was the fish, but it was this product in particular that was like the cure-all for
Yeah.
every disease imaginable.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. So maybe I think it goes back to like what kind of oil or fish oil they add. There's so much stuff that we're learning in the industry, Laura. So maybe that could be it. But yeah, what's your take on that?
Okay, so there are plant sources. One is algae, which well, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole, but there are some algae that's been genetically engineered to produce
Omega 3s.
almost an analog to a fish omega-3 spectrum, but that's probably not what you guys are talking about. Flax also has omega-3s, but omega-3 fatty acids are, EPA, DHA, and AHA. Sorry, an APA. The ratio of those is different from, fish oil to flax. And flax is just missing one of them.
Yeah, it comes back to Dr. Amber's question today while she was answering about the mobility powder. We do have flax in it, and I think that's where the omega 3s are.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
flaxseed oil only has alpha linoleic acid, which is the
Okay.
ALA. Fish oil has EPA and DHA. So yes, flaxseed oil is a source of omega-3, but that's only like a tenth
Portion.
of the picture. Yeah.
But did it help, Dr. Amber? Like, was the animal or the pet of your friend got to have the same benefits with flaxseed compared to fish oil?
So I didn't recommend it to that dog, actually. He wasn't a patient of mine, just my friend's dog.
Question here, is it true that raw diet offers benefits to dogs than ordinary dog kibble? I mean, there's like a rise of raw freeze food, right? And heard so much about the grain-free diet, Dr. Amber, that it causes like heart problems for dogs. Am I correct?
Yeah, they were diagnosing dilated cardiomyopathy in pets, in dogs that didn't have a history of it, that were breeds that don't typically get DCM.
Wow.
So I'd like to hear your take on that, Laura. Do you feel comfortable speaking on like the inclusion of grains in pet food and like their nutritional value? Like, why would a pet food company include
that.
grains?
It's going to be, AFCO guidelines stipulate 18% protein, but most are formulated. They're over formulated. So you're looking at more like 20 to 25 for the more premium, maybe even up into the 30s for the super premium type diets. Then you'll probably see a 10 to 15% fat on top of that. So what are we up to? 40, 45%? The remaining, 60 or so percent of a diet is going to be carbohydrate. And that's where your grains are going to come in because they're a cheap source of carbohydrates.
Okay.
Realistically, I've seen articles, something came out fairly recently that disproved the correlation between DCM and a grain-free diet, or rather there's no real link, I guess, between grains or the absence of and dilated cardiomyopathy. I feed my dog a diet that has grains in it.
Yeah, I always did too. And for me, if you're looking at dogs are not carnivores, they're omnivores. And so dogs having grains, in my mind, is fine. Like they would eat grains in the wild if we're thinking about wolves.
Yeah.
Which domestic dogs are not wolves. I understand that. But that's sometimes the argument as well. Wild animals don't eat grains. They certainly don't eat the farmed grains like are put into dog food. But I waver on cat food because cats are obligate carnivores. And so do they need those grains? Probably
they don't
not.
digest them very well.
Yeah.
Cats don't digest carbohydrate very well.
Yeah, the whole can of worms.
Exactly. But so what's your take on trend like raw diet, Laura? Like, is that better? Or because like I did give Tuxedo, like I think for 3 years, like a freeze dried raw food. I really saw like how he loves it, like his energy really like is different.
Yes.
But he developed stone because it's all meat, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that thing too was the caveat of eating meat and raw foods. Now he's on a very specific diet that can really like lower the pH of his like you know like body, and at
Right.
the same time like, so I basically switch back and forth to the prescribed food, and I have another company that customizes food so that to lessen the oxidation.
Yeah.
So,
Here's an interesting tidbit about raw food. I wouldn't give a strict opinion of whether I believe in it or not. I can say that there are some cool benefits to feeding a raw diet in that yeah, you're getting, the enzymes and the bacteria and all that that's present in raw food. So this is kind of like priming your digestive system with enzymes. And on top of that, you can see some pretty awesome benefits in terms of the diversity of microbes in the lower intestine, let's say, of a dog that's been fed a raw diet. So there are definitely benefits there. To sort of revisit what you said about tuxedo and getting kidney stones from a raw diet, think
mhm,
about, like I said earlier, commercially available foods in the USA have to follow AFCO regulations.
mhm,
And those regulations are, let's say, take into account processing that happens with dog food.
mhm,
And that processing, say if we're talking about kibble, makes that really user friendly as a pet parent, right? It's dry, it's self-stable, it's really easy to feed, but in that processing, that sort of cooking does damage the nutrients a little bit and makes them less bioavailable, we would say. So
mm,
your dog has to eat a higher volume of food in order to absorb the nutrients that they need. That is
right,
less the case with a raw diet because it's not processed. It
yeah,
does have some does have a little bit of processing. I'll talk about that in a minute. But
mhm.
in terms of limiting the availability of nutrients,
It's
raw
yeah,
diet is really accessible. So, but unfortunately, it still has to meet those AFCO regulations. So magnesium is an interesting one, and I'm glad you brought it up, which would be the cause of those kidney stones. So
oh,
um, magnesium, I might have the numbers not quite right here, so don't quote me, but if magnesium is, assumed to be 20% digestible in a food, then, they would put, that much extra in the AFCO regulations so that when the food is processed and it's only 20% digestible, you're still hitting the number that you need to. In a raw diet, you have to hit those AFCO regulations, but it's way more digestible.
mm,
So now all of a sudden, Tuxedo is getting lots more magnesium than he needs. That is changing the pH of his urinary tract, and he's getting.
mhm, yeah,
So it's a little bit like, yes, you're getting a good food in terms of microbiota in your intestine
yeah,
and all those enzymes, and wonderfully, really highly digestible, very accessible nutrients. But the way that the regulatory system is set up, it's kind of makes it a little bit complicated.
yeah.
Does that
So
make
it's
sense?
like it has, yes, it makes sense. So there has to be a balance.
Hmm.
Yeah. This has been a great talk with Laura.
Yeah, and we've learned so much. Keep following us for part 2 with so much more to uncover.
This is Donnie, your chief treat lady at Vital Pet Life.
Once again, thank you for tuning in. This is Dr. Amber, your official veterinarian at Vital Pet Life. Until next time.